Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley. And today we're going to start by just touching on, it's probably going to be released the second, the third week in May, this podcast. And we have just been through so many solar flares. The last 10 days that we've experienced have just been brutal. And for anyone on this path, maybe you feel this, maybe you don't, and that's okay. Wherever you're at is perfect. But for me, what's been happening is just been bombarded, and it's literally felt like a full-time job, having to just keep up with all of the energies that are coming in. And what that looks like is getting triggered a lot. And also not just the triggers, but just this general sense that I've got to stop everything that I'm doing right now and drop in, because there's so much energy here that it's making me like dissociate and leave my body, which is programming. But there's just been so much that's been coming through.
But not only that, it's how much physically we're going through too. Yeah. It's like me and Danny will move throughout the day, and then we'll just be slammed, like an exhaustion that you can't, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to this, like an exhaustion you cannot even describe. And then on top of that, you're being triggered and all this stuff is coming up. It's on every level.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And when I started this work a couple of years ago, I was not in a bad place. I was not in like the depths of my depression. I was still searching for answers. About 2.5 years ago, I found this work through MSU, and it really started to shift things. And I would get triggered, and I would move through a healing. And maybe every like month or so, I'd have like a really big, deep thing to go into. And then it would mellow out. And then it was like I would have time to integrate, and I would still be triggered, and I would be going into things, but it wouldn't be like this incessant everyday pounding of like, I wake up and there's stuff right here for me to go through. This is now in May 2024. I wake up, and the first thing I have to do is start dropping and processing the energy that I feel. There's so much here. And then it's, a couple hours later, oh, here, there's more here. I will stop what I'm doing and kind of work through this next layer. And then it's, oh, well, there's more that's arrived, but I can't do this right now because I've got to walk the dog, or I've got to do this thing of work, or I've got to show up as a coach. And so it's like, okay, I'm powerful enough to be okay that I can put that on the back burner. And then before I go to bed, sometimes it's like hours and hours and hours of just processing what's coming through. And yeah, these solar flares have been kicking my butt.
Yeah, I mean, it's been super intense. I was telling Danny the other day, like, I ran avoidance so much last week. And it was to the point where I was like, this is unusual. Like, this is unusual how much I'm avoiding. It was almost like I couldn't get off my phone. It was like I couldn't stop avoiding. And it was so intense. And obviously you pointed out like, yeah, because there's so much coming up. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I think too that it's a part of why I'm not sleeping at night. I think there's just so much that I'm needing to process and move through. And because it's so much and so intense, like I just don't, the powerlessness program is running of like, I can't do all this. And so I'd rather just avoid. And so this week I'm being the past few days have been very intentional about like, okay, drop in, even though there's a lot here, just start processing just one layer at a time, because it does feel like I'm getting hit by like 10 tornadoes at once, which nothing about that is fun.
No. And from what it feels like for me, not to say this is true for everyone, but it feels like I don't really have a choice. Yeah. It feels like this is what my path is in this life right now. And if I choose to resist it, I'm just going to make things worse. it's gonna make every aspect of my life like not as enjoyable. So just get on with it and do it. And I found that whenever I'm going through these phases of like, oh my god, I feel like so dissociated right now. I feel like so spacey and like, ugh, because there's just like so much here. I'm like, what the heck is this? And then when I stop doing whatever it is I'm doing and I'm able to have that time and drop in and start to ground the energies, and I've been trying to spend as much time outside, bare feet in the earth, but doing this work is what really shifts it. Yes, that physical aspect helps, but actually sitting down and doing the work and dropping in and opening, that's what's really been helping me. And I leave the session, I'm like, oh yeah, that was all I needed to do, is just spend an hour in my heart, and then I feel better again. But when all that stuff comes in, I'm like, oh my god, what is all of this? However am I going to clear out all of this stuff that's either being activated or I'm feeling it collectively? I'm still not at a point yet where I'm aware of what exactly it is that I'm feeling, but there's a lot that I'm feeling.
Yeah. You know, and if I can be really honest, I weave in and out of really disliking this path,
Yeah.
if I'm being very real. It's not like I fucking love this path and this is great and this is awesome. Like, I'm moving through a very like, there's so much that's coming up, like really deep stuff, and I'm just like, fuck this. Like, I woke up one morning and I was like, so this is it? Is this it? Like, we're just gonna be moving through all this stuff. And I know that obviously it's not, but just to keep it real with everybody, like, I know it's not always that exciting and fun and awesome. It's really not. And so that's the cycle that I'm moving through right now.
Yeah, and in that, it's finding that part of you that even while you're moving through such a challenging time that you might hate, oh, I'm still going to pick myself up and do the work. And wow, that's divinity right there.
Yeah. Someone texted me the other day and she was like, I'm learning to be okay when it's not okay. And I was like, all right, well, that was a message for me because I'm so not okay when it's not okay. I'm not in surrender at all. And I suffer as a result of that. So it's like just bring in surrender. It is what it is. It's not like you're going to leave. It's not like you just tap out, right? So yeah, learning how to be okay when it's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously run the aspects of those programs. I think we all do to some degree, unless you've kind of like, transcended that, which is what we're all working towards here. But the thing that I've talked about this on podcasts before, still gravitate towards seems to be coffee and food. And this last week, I'm still working through this mold stuff, which I know we've spoken about before on the podcast. And I was having another flare up as I had got into some an exposure a couple of weeks ago. And I was moving through all that stuff and I was starting to find balance again. And then like last week, I came out of something and I was just like hit with, the next thing I knew, I was like in the fridge, back of the fridge, like, oh, well, I want to eat this next. I want to eat this next. And I was like, when I came out, I snapped out of it. I was like, whoa, like what just happened? And then in reflection, I found out that we got hit with a huge like X-class solar flare that afternoon. I was like, when these solar flares come in, and this isn't about giving our power away to these things, right? It's just to help us understand what's happening. When these solar flares come in and they hit Earth, it's raising the frequency of the collective and it's shining a light on the shadow, right? So if we have, like for me, if I've still got programs of powerlessness that are in there and they learn to cope with things through eating, when these big blasts of light come from the sun, it's gonna unearth any of those programs. And so this last week it's felt like a double whammy. I was just starting to get off the detox of this last mold exposure, and then all of these solar flares started coming in at like one after another. And finally last night, I think I said to you, I was laying in bed, I was like, I finally feel like my body's like finding equilibrium, like balance again. Because every time like I have an exposure, like everything gets flared up and I'm just so prone to my system kind of getting out of whack. And then I start wanting to eat and drink coffee for energy, and then that messes me up further, and it's a cycle.
Yeah.
I
think that if I could say, if there's one beautiful thing that comes out of these things, is if you choose to go in, right, when things are activated, you will discover a lot. And I think one of the things that has hit me like a ton of bricks recently was I grew up in a very enmeshed family, incredibly enmeshed, like not healthy enmeshed. Obviously, and no enmeshment is, I think there are layers to enmeshment. I think I'm one of the gnarliest layers of enmeshment. And I started doing a deep dive into enmeshment. And I remember like one night, like you were working out, and I just like put on YouTube, like all these videos on enmeshment, because I wanted to understand deeper what it was that I've experienced and what I'm still experiencing, right? Just because I'm across the country from my family does not mean that energetically I'm still not enmeshed with them. And when I started really breaking and studying enmeshment, I was like, oh, this is fucked. Like Rachel said, that the hardest parenting style to heal is enmeshment, because enmeshment is masked as love, which is obviously it's not real love. And it fucks and manipulates you in ways that you can't even see. I know that there's so much in my blind spot that I'm still not aware of. And as I'm walking into the enmeshment, this was the first time that I actually am seeing it for what it is. And me and Danny, we very much parallel in our journeys. And I feel like you're always like a one step ahead of me in the discovery. And you were just moving through enmeshment, which allowed you to shine a light on what I couldn't see, what I was moving through, which was enmeshment. And and I'm not ready to share everything because it is deep and it is layered, and I haven't fully moved through all of it, and I'm not ready to share a lot of it. But what I'll share is this: is I realized, and it hit me hard, that I just learned really young that my feelings and my emotions don't matter. That my parents, especially moms, emotions matter way more than I do. So even to this day, I run a lot of here's everyone before me. Like and when I really feel into it, it's like, yeah, I can feel my inner child being like, fuck me. Who cares about me? You know, she's in pain. He's in pain. She's suffering. He's in suffering. So do whatever you need to do to be there for them, to take that on, to absorb all of that. And so as a really young child, I learned that I don't matter. Nothing about me matters. And even if I'm not okay, it doesn't matter, because them being not okay is far more important than me not being okay. And now as an adult, I'm completely that really hit me hard. And now I'm in a place where I'm learning to, with my inner child, no, you matter. And it's about putting you first. You keep putting, and all I've ever done is like, everything is externalized, so even as something like the animal shelter, I've talked about this a lot of the podcast, like I've been volunteering there, I've been fostering, I've been rescuing, I've been doing all this stuff. And it's all of this like, well, let me save everybody else. And when I save everybody else, that's what my worth is. And who actually needs saving is myself, from me. Like I need to save me, but I'm still doing it for everybody else, because all I know is everybody else is before me and they need saving even before me, because I don't matter. And so that has been a very big eye-opening door that's open for me. And underneath that door is a million other doors. And it's a lot. It's heavy and it's thick. And when it hit me, I was like, okay, so we got to move through this one. And there's so much more.
And just tie the pieces together for everyone listening. How does that relate to the enmeshment?
When you're enmeshed with, let's say, your parents or both your parent, what I experienced growing up was I lost my sense of identity, because I became everything for my mom. Everything. I was her best friend. I was her venting. I was her whipping board. I was everything. So I learned how to just be there for her. So there goes my sense of self, because I didn't matter if she's in pain. Like I remember being a little kid and just wanting to constantly save her and wanting to make her feel better. And even as an adult, when she's moving through really painful stuff, I was always like showering her and coddling her and enabling her to, at the extent of me. It never mattered what I felt, because I've been so programmed to believe that she is just more important than me. And that's the enmeshment.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I share so much of this. And yeah, Ellie and I do tend to move through things together in kind of like waves where we'll both be kind of working through something. And I think that's something to do with our partnership, where if one of us starts to shift an energy within the relationship, it calls or invites the other person to look at that aspect of themselves too. So I feel like that's kind of like what's going on. And I completely share this whole thing with you of like, I felt like I just had to be there I was just there for them. And like, I couldn't see the enmeshment for the longest time. And what I've been working through over the past couple of weeks is something that I experienced when I was deeply, deeply depressed, which is life is meaningless. And I had the epiphany on Sunday of kind of like how this has all been playing out. And this has been happening for like 4 years. These waves will come in and I would feel like life is completely meaningless and that there's no point of this existence. Like, what's the point of anything? And what it would do, it would drive me away from all the things that I used to get meaning from watching any kind of TV that was surface level, having surface level conversations. It would start driving me towards this like spiritual path, this mystical path. And as I'm learning more and more and more, I'm still looking for that answer outside of myself. And it wasn't until I started turning that attention inwards and realizing that this meaninglessness is a program and it's stemming somewhere from my childhood. And I've healed a lot of hopelessness that's been around it and a lot of disconnection. And for me, it was my identity was built up around being there for my mom and being this light that made her happy. And in the enmeshed inner child, like that's what I thought my role was. And then when my parents separated, and then I was growing up mainly just with my dad, I lost that role. So that identity, that construct that I built up of this is who I am and what I'm for, and this is my purpose, and this is what gives me meaning and love and affection and connection. All of a sudden, that person's now not very much in the picture. And so I've got this huge gaping wide hole of emotional disconnection now. And then that gets projected onto society. And I think that the world is meaningless and everything is meaningless when that's really what I'm feeling inside. And then the trick is you go into the spiritual teachings and they're like, yeah, life is meaningless. But then that's just a way for me to bypass my stuff and not actually feel the pain that's actually in there.
Can you go deeper into the meaningless feeling? Like, what does it actually feel for you? Does it feel existential? Like, go into the details of that. Because it's so deep what you just said. Because if you're not acutely self-aware of yourself, it could just be looked at completely as, well, this existence is meaningless. But you decided to go deeper, and then there's the wound that's causing it.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's layers to that which are true as well.
Yeah.
That this is meaningless.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot that like human beings create the meaning within ourselves, but all of that is like it's like super mindy, right?
Mhm.
And the work that we do is great. So like let's go deep within ourselves and figure out where this energy is and what's the pain. So for me, it was this the meaningless was like tied to hopelessness. It felt like an empty void. And when it would come on, like we went to tacos in this beautiful place. It's organic taco place in San Diego that Ellie and I like to go to. And you're looking out, it has like open, like it's like open air. So we're like sat at this like low bar kind of seating area, eating a couple of tacos, like looking out at San Diego, like so beautiful. And when this program isn't running, I could sit there and I would be dropping, I would be present and I would be connected to myself. And I would be enjoying the food, enjoying the company and looking out at the beautiful weather and watching the people pass and be like, wow, look at the awe, look at the wonder. And isn't this fantastic? And when this energy comes in, all I see is just emptiness. All I feel is just there is no point to any of this in any kind of way, that none of this has any relevance, has any meaning. And then that leads to, well, what's the point of my existence? This existence isn't anything. And then why am I even here? I should just
Yeah.
leave. I should just push the exit button and jump out of here. And maybe that's what was fueling the suicidal thoughts that I had in like the depths of my depression in 2018, 2019. Not entirely sure if they're related, but yeah, it's that same feeling of just complete emptiness.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, for me, what I've been moving into is like I've always carried all these programs that everything about this life is just sad and dark. And when I started going deeper into it, I realized like, no, those are my mother's programs. And here's the enmeshment again. Because I was so enmeshed with her. You know, my friend, I was just telling my friend through text message what I'm moving through, and she sends me this image of basically all these cords just all in this huge entanglement. And like Danny always makes a joke that like everywhere you see, if there's cords around me, there's always entanglement in my earphones, in my
My phone got tangled in your attachments
there
yesterday.
you go. So symbolic of like the enmeshment that I still have with my parents. And she sent me this picture and I was like, there it is. It's like, think about it when you're so enmeshed. And when I say enmeshed too, like I was physically very enmeshed. Like my parents were very rigid. So like I stayed home a lot, which is like sometimes I'm like, that's the reason why I'm like socially strange sometimes. But I was with my mom all the time, all the time. And I would not describe her as a very joyful, happy person who loves life. And so when you're enmeshed with somebody who has those kind of programs, and I'm as sensitive as I am, I absorbed all of that stuff. And then, of course, created and birthed a bunch of programs of my own with that. But when I feel those programs of this is so meaningless, everything is dark, like I can't wait to leave. I can really feel into that, be like, "That I don't actually feel that way." And then I know it's from her. And then there's, "Well, why did I absorb it?" Well, it's because you were constantly in that. It's like the only thing, I mean, not the only thing, what I remember a lot from my childhood was a lot of just like everywhere we went, it felt dark. Like even driving to the store felt dark. You know, I could look at everything and I can feel the gloom in everything. And I remember just being a kid being like, "What is wrong with you?" And now I see, well, it's because that's how when you run those programs, everything's filtered through that, right? When you're running programs of this place sucks, I can't wait to die, Jesus take me back, like when's he gonna come, like all this shit, everything is gloom and doom. And then that became my filter. Those became my glasses. And then to this day, I have to work through a lot to find joy. So for me, a win is when I'm like standing in front of like on top of a mountain, or even when I'm in my car and I can just be still and I can feel the wind and the sun and the birds chirping. And then I'm like, oh, this is it. Like, but I had to work so hard to get there because everything is always filtered through what none of this actually means anything. And I just want to die. Like, yeah.
And have you got to a place yet where you're able to energetically detach from that dark energy?
I think I've done a lot of work around those programs. I think obviously there are definitely still pieces of that left, but I've done a lot of work. Getting to a place where I understood where this was coming from was big for me. Um, because I always thought like just something was wrong with me. Like, why are you such a depressed personality? Like I couldn't understand how people enjoyed life. I think when I met you too, the thing about you is like when you're in a good mood or like when you're feeling good, you are high on life. I've never been like that. I've
Yeah.
never been like that. And I remember like Fiori one time in class, I was just talking about like all of this darkness. And one of our dear friends, Claire, was like, Ellie, you know, like to me, like, I don't feel that from you. You're such a bright light. And Fiori goes, yeah, isn't it amazing? And when she said, isn't it amazing? What it said to me was, even through all the darkness that I've experienced and absorbed and run programs on, I could still be a light. And like Ellie means shining light. And I know like that's like there's very correlation in that too. But I have felt and faced and still have to alchemize a lot of darkness because I've just never been high on life like you. And it when I see and feel that in you, I'm like, what is that like? Because that's not been my reality this entire incarnation. It's been the extreme opposite, which
Mm.
is where you see joy, I see darkness. Like I have programs where even when I experience happiness, quickly a program comes in and goes, yeah, but that's not your original state, right? You know that this is fleeting, that actually what's truth is that everything is depressing.
Right.
And that'll come over and that'll ruin my day.
Yeah, you're attached to suffering,
Yeah.
and I'm attached to happiness, which doesn't it's two opposite ends of the spectrum, same thing.
Yeah.
Because when you're attached to the suffering and the shadow aspects, obviously, like it's grim.
Yeah.
And when you're attached to happiness, it's never lasting because you're attached to it. So what it's led in my life is these swings. I'll go from really good, almost like bipolar. Like you go from really good to I'm going through a good phase right now, and then things come crashing down.
Yeah.
And then when things aren't perfect, I'm constantly in my head like, oh, I wish I was here. Oh, I need to get back to. It's like I'm constantly in my mind trying to tell myself I'm trying to get to this place. And the irony is about this journey is realizing that you don't need to go anywhere. There's nowhere that you need to get to. It's you need to surrender to the flow of what it is you're doing and where you're going. And that is ironically the place that I'm trying to get to. And that's why it happens internally. And that's the surrender, the way of surrender that I'm constantly getting to learn. And obviously for you, the way of surrender, same thing, except learning how to surrender and detach from the stuff that you're holding on to, which sounds like it isn't yours.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like mine. And it's been heavy and it's destroyed me a lot in my life. I've gone to really some very, 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 very dark places by myself on my own. And especially last year, if you guys listen to the podcast, like getting off the antidepressants, like really brought all that stuff up. And I've worked through a lot of it. Thank God.
Right.
Like I haven't had that kind of episode in a very long time where those programs are really activated. Which means I did a lot of work on it, but holy shit, like that's no way to live. Those programs, like that's not life. Like it destroys everything that is beautiful. It can't even make you appreciate a goddamn flower, And it's like, who wants to live like that?
Yeah.
And then it makes me sad to know that, I have a parent that runs those programs. It's really sad. And my job is to alchemize those programs so that I don't end up like them.
Yeah.
Tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to keep going with this life is meaningless wound and kind of work through the rest of the day yesterday. And as we were driving, I saw this vision of myself, and it was going from a crouched ball to like standing up and opening my arms. And it feels like my entire life I've been crouched down, huddling up in a ball, trying to fit myself in a box and look for this love and connection and meaning in everything outside of me, and especially a partnership. And this is one of the big wounds that I have that relates to, as I mentioned, like my mother when I was younger, and now I project it onto my partnerships. And in all of the best periods of my adult life has always been post breakup. And I never understood why until recently. And I always felt so free. I would break up with a partner, which I wouldn't want to do. I would be holding on for dear life, trying to make something work. Then I would move through this period of pain as I was processing the breakup. And then after that, I would go through this massive period of expansion. And here comes this balancing act that I go through. And in this period of expansion, it's always I'm free. And I realize now it's because I'm free from all of the programs that were making me change to fill that void with somebody else. So I would contort myself, I would change myself, I would do all of these crazy people-pleasing programs. I would wear all of these masks in order to get the love and attention and affection from my partner, to have that stability, that security. And that ultimately constrained me and who I am. And then once that relationship had ended, however long it ran its course, I would go through this huge period of, oh my God, I'm free to be who I want. And now I get to find that same freedom while still in this amazing relationship I have with Ellie. And that's the beauty of this work, is whereas in the past, there was moments where I was like, maybe I just need to be single. Maybe I need to be single my whole life. And then, that happiness, that period of freedom would only be short-lived. It would be 2, 3, 4 months, and then back, into the same cycles. And now yesterday was that moment of fully like feeling within like, oh, this is possible. I might not be all the way there yet right now. That's okay. But this is possible to really find within myself. And that comes from alchemizing that pain of meaning and stop looking for that connection and love outside of myself. And so it was a huge breakthrough day yesterday. It was really, really beautiful and very painful as well. Like not void of any pain, but on the other side of pain is beauty.
Yeah, I made it. It was kind of a joke, but it was kind of real. The other night when we were making dinner, and I was like, if we weren't doing this work, you and I probably wouldn't be together. There's no way, because his wounds are looking for connection, and my wounds is I need to protect myself, so I'm closing myself up, because the moment that I open and actually connect is too vulnerable for me. And so, blessed that we're doing this work.
Blessed we can feel our soul connection. And but they say with partners that your true soulmate out there, or you can have many soulmates, but your soulmate is there to reflect back to you the parts of you that need healing. They're there to help your soul. And often our human self can't understand what that means until we really do this work and start connecting to that. Because our programs are wounding. They want the opposite of probably what's needed from our soul, right?
Yeah. It's so beautiful. And you and I think in the beginning of our courtship, there was a lot of like, oh, I guess this isn't it, or like this isn't going to work because of those things. And obviously blessed that we worked through all of it. But yeah, everything that you're seeking outside of yourself is what you're missing within yourself. And we hear that all the time, and everyone's like, yeah, home is where the heart is, and all these cliche things. And it's like, no, there's deep divine truth in all of that. And you can only understand that when you really go on the journey of discovering that connection within yourself. And I'm not 100% there yet, but nowhere near the end of that. But to know that, I mean, that's freedom. Because, the other day you were giving this very, of course, you get into these places where sometimes you'll just go into this wisdom is just spewing out of you. And we were talking about how like anything that's attached, anything that's a need, none of that is love. And because we live in the upside down world, that's what we've been taught, is that attachment and need and want and all these things that you from another person who's going to fill you is love. And everything that you've learned, it's the opposite. So, and then we're all on the paths of understanding what actual true love is. And what actual true love is, you can only really feel when you connected within yourself.
Yeah, because we lived in separation for all these number of years. We were looking through that lens of separation consciousness for love outside of ourselves. And now we get to go on this beautiful journey of oneness consciousness, which requires us to look at every aspect of our shadow in order to get to that place. I'd love to touch on one final thing that you mentioned right there about home is where the heart is, because Rachel mentioned this the other day when we were all together in casual conversation. And she was teaching us about how you'll find when you keep making your home your heart, you'll go through these long periods, or you can do, of not feeling like you fit in anywhere. And this is something that I have dealt with my entire life.
Yeah.
And I really felt like I fit in when I lived in Colorado for those number of years, in terms of when I just loved the mountains, but I still didn't feel like I fit in. And finally, like, we moved out here and it's the same thing. I'm like, we're now living in San Diego. I don't feel like I fit in here. I don't feel like this place is my forever home. And this beautiful teaching was like, once you make your heart your forever home and you do it enough that it really integrates and you're truly living from there, then in some aspect, like, that will unlock to find that place that actually is, and it will feel very different. And I'm excited to get there because I am not there and still moving through many waves of like projecting my need for somewhere. Like, we live in San Diego and sometimes we're driving around and like, just this place just doesn't feel like it. Doesn't feel like this is the place that, you know, we're going to settle down and we're going to love our life. And I learned very quickly, because of my experiences in Colorado and Hawaii and Maryland, like, when you move to a place and you have this expectation that it's going to be something, it's often not. And then that's the projection, that we think this thing outside of us, this place, is going to feel like home, when actually we need to find that place of home within ourselves, and then we can start to find it.
Yeah. Sometimes I have fantasies about, like, you know, going to the countryside in France and, like, you know, renovating an old house and all this stuff. And it's like, Ellie, no matter where you go, you will bring your programs. So why don't you just heal where you're at? And
Yeah.
then
When you're leaving to Mexico today, you're going to do that?
I was leaving to Mexico today. That's right. I was telling you that I think I'm going to go to Mexico. And a week ago, I was also approached Danny. I said, you know what? I'm going to move out of San Diego and I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there because I don't like it here and all this shit. I mean, it's all ways for me to escape and avoid and all these freaking programs. But I'm staying. And I just got to keep doing the work.
Isn't it wild? Like, when, you know, when an energy like that gets activated, the lengths our mind will go to and painting this fantasy and demonizing the
Oh
place
my
that we
God.
are to justify the pain and the disconnection that we're feeling.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
It's so wild.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I still get lost in those things. And so I just look forward to the day where I'm like, oh, here's the program playing out, like, just right in my face. Because when I was doing that, it wasn't until you looked at me or you said something and I was like, oh, I'm running program.
Yeah. And that's full circle. That's the detachment piece. So the more that we're able to, and this is a process, right? This is an energetic process that we're speaking on. You can't expect to get there in the first day, in the first week. Maybe for you, it's the first year. This journey is different for everybody. It depends on your own personal journey of healing, how much work you choose to put in. That's another big factor. And also how many layers of healing that you need to go through to be able to truly connect to your heart and find detachment. Something that we're often asked as coaches, how do I know if I'm detached? Well, if you're in your mind wanting to know if I'm detached, you're not detached. You can only know that when you get into your heart. So if you're asking the question, you're not there yet. Keep going, keep doing the work. And the more enmeshment that we have with our, you know, family members, loved ones, these programs that we run, the more attachment is going to be in there. Energetically, things are going to be more glued together. And it takes time to remove those pieces one by one. And, you know, it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of patience to go through. And everyone's journey is going to be different. That's why my journey looks different to Ellie's, but then there's a lot of similarities as well.
Yeah. And, you know, watch your victim consciousness program, because that runs for me when I'm like, why enmeshment? Like, this is so hard. And it's like, oh, there's another program. Okay, so it is what it is. And yeah, just honor, take it layer by layer, everybody. Take it from me, take it layer by layer. Because, you know, I'll run stuff of like, I just want this to heal. Like, I just want to get to the end. It's like, okay, what way of oneness are you missing right now, Ellie? The way of patience and surrender and everything else. So yeah.
If you are new to this podcast, please visit mastersofselfuniversity.com if you're interested in learning more, seeing what we have to offer, and if you want to get coaching from any number of our mystical coaches of oneness, like myself and Ellie. And we have a bunch of stuff on there to check out. So please feel free to search. I'm going to click the link, mastersofselfuniversity.com, and come come check us out and keep listening. We really benefit if you're able, if you don't have the money and you don't want to do a course yet, if you can just leave a review, comment on any platform that you're on, or share any podcast. If you know other people that are interested in this kind of thing and doing the work, be like, hey, have you heard of these guys? Please give us a listen. Because all of that really helps us to put on these podcasts for free for you guys. And it helps us with the algorithms, which, you know, we all need those boosts in this world. So thank you so much for listening this far. And we look forward to being with you next Thursday. All right. Bye.
Bye.